Hello, Dr. L's class. This is Abbot Austin, and I'm going to try to answer your questions, so thank you for them. So here we go. So Gianna had a few questions. One was, when did you know you wanted to be part of a monastery? The short answer is that after I visited this monastery, I felt called to it. And so that was soon after college. I went on a retreat here, not thinking about joining the monastery, but I just went on a retreat at this monastery. I was thinking about a religious vocation, but not a monastic one. Actually, I had at that point in my mind ruled out being a monk. I didn't think that's what God was calling me to. But I was wrong, and partly I was wrong because I didn't understand fully the different kinds of monks there are. And I felt called to be a monk at a place where monasticism is, in the life of prayer, I should say, is central, but at the same time have some works that we do outside the monastery. So in our case, we've done especially education. So I had ruled that out, but I went on a retreat here at this monastery, just as a kind of a discernment to help me discern what I should do with my life, which religious order or even diocesan priesthood, which should I join. So I visited and I felt called to it. At the same time, though, it's not like you sign on the dotted line right away. You go through a process, right? But at that point, I started thinking to myself and sensing that God's calling me to the monastery, particularly to this monastery. And so then I started pursuing that. And then you go through a formation process, you go through an application process, and then if you're accepted, you go through a formation process, and there's different stages along that way. It takes a little over 4 years, and then you make your final commitment for life. So I hope that answered it. What do you like most about being an abbot? I would say, if I can put it this way, the opportunity to fulfill an important work for the good of the monastery and for the good of the church. So, there's that expression, someone has to do it. It is an important role. Someone has to do it. And so I hope and am kind of motivated by the hope that I can do the job, fulfill the job, this important job for the good of the monastery and for the good of the church. So that's something that kind of inspires me or gives me a motivation, and I like about the role. What do you like least about being an abbot? I would say administration. I joke with people, avoid administration if you can. So there's a lot of things you have to do as an administrator in charge of things. It's just some difficult things that you're never going to satisfy everyone. But here actually I would say this. The thing that's a bit of a sacrifice is there's other things I would like to do. There's other projects that I would like to do, I'd enjoy doing, and I think that are good projects that are worth doing. And also I think that I have certain talents for doing those projects. But having this job, I can't get to them. So I'm unable to do things that I would like to do. I try to as much as I can, but to a large extent I just can't. Just not enough time in the day. So that's something that I dislike about it, but at the same time I'm willing to put up with that if this is what God wants me to do. I trust, and I think it's an important thing in life in general, because there's always what the economists call opportunity costs, where you choose one thing, you're going to have to sacrifice another. It costs you that opportunity to do another. So you have to trust God's providence, and if He's asking you to do something, He'll use that to make the most. So we often think we know how our talents and abilities and so forth can be best used, and it's not bad to have ideas about that and to discern and to act on that as much as possible. But sometimes the Lord asks us to do something, we have to trust that He'll make the most of that, and that your way of contributing in the grand scheme of things that only He fully understands will be best in the way He's directing us. So I hope that helps. Good questions. Long asks, if someone wants to leave the monastery, what happens? Any rules that they need to follow? And can they come back if they want to? So as you might know, in the Rule of St. Benedict, it talks about this, and it doesn't encourage it, right? But if someone leaves a monastery, St. Benedict says that they can be let back as much as 3 times. And then after that, it's just, you have to move on. So today there's a formal process in canon law for when you leave, when you want a dispensation, what's called the dispensation from your vows that you took, or you took your vows to God, so it's a serious matter, and you did it after a long period of discernment and careful discernment. So this is longer than you would for a marriage. Usually, people might be discerning longer for a marriage, but usually it's longer. So again, it's over 4 years at least, and so you made a decision, you made your vows to God. You want to keep those. And there's going to be hard times you go through, right? So you don't want to run when things get hard, even though they get very, very hard. You should expect too that you go through crises in any vocation, that there'll be these moments of crisis that you have to make your way through, and that God will help you to grow through and become better at your vocation through them, actually. So you don't want to do this hastily, and so the church has learned to put in a certain procedures to make sure a person is discerning this correctly. And one of the things that these procedures can do is just it slows it down and make sure that you're thinking about it, and so forth, so you don't hastily do this. And then you go and you eventually get a dispensation that would go. There's different ways this can happen, and get too much into the weeds to try to go through all that. But usually you'd send on, the person would make the case, would send it on to officials at Rome who would work and improve the dispensation. If someone's also a priest, there's also a need for it to be dispensed from what's called the clerical state. So it's one thing to be dispensed from your religious vows for your monastic state, in our case, and then it's another matter to be dispensed from a clerical state. So I hope that answers it. It's a little bit technical. Can a person come back? As St. Benedict said, you could, yes. There'd be a process for that. St. Benedict, as you might know, says that when a person comes back, they're given kind of a lesser or a lower spot in the order, right? Because there's something called instatio, where we kind of have certain seniority things that aren't very heavy, but there's some things like that. So the person would come in at the lowest spot. There'd be some determination about that. It has happened. So people have left. They've been actually, in some cases, even our own monastery, been away for many years. And then they eventually came back. So it can happen. Okay, and then Daniel has some questions about pacifism. In order to be part of a monastery, do you have to uphold a strict code of pacifism? And he says the reason he asks is that many monks centuries ago upheld a strict vow of pacifism to the point where even if they were attacked by bandits, they learned special types of restraining techniques to be used to defend themselves against an attacker without causing damage to their attacker. From what I've heard, these techniques eventually became the basis for martial arts like judo and jiu-jitsu. I don't know that history, so and I wonder, were these Christian monks or perhaps Buddhist monks? I don't know, but there's a tradition where monks and religious should not be fighting, so they wouldn't be fighting in a war. They can't be recruited as soldiers, they shouldn't be, and if they are, they should resist that. And monks are religious in general, different religious orders like Dominicans and so forth. They can become chaplains in the army, so they can become members of the army in that sense, but they wouldn't be fighting themselves. So in that sense, that's true. We shouldn't fight. We have a different role within society. I will make this distinction, though. When you say, do you have to uphold a strict code of pacifism, the answer is no, in this sense that usually pacifism means that you believe that all wars are wrong. So you don't have to believe that to be a monk or a Catholic, but to be a monk as well. So in the sense of, do you have to be a pacifist in order to be a monk? No, you can believe that sometimes under certain conditions war is just, and therefore you don't think it's wrong for people to fight it. Still, you don't partake in it because that's not your role within the society. You have a different mission to fulfill, and it'd be compromised if you got involved in fighting wars, and the ugly business really of war. So you don't have to be a strict pacifist in that sense, but you would not bear arms. You would not fight in that way. Daniel's question goes on and says, again, a strict code of pacifism. Do you have to follow to the point where you aren't allowed to cause harm to someone, even in self-defense? I don't think that. I think you could defend yourself. I think that's a kind of a natural right to self-defend. Um, but there's kind of discernment there too. Generally, you just try to avoid having a physical conflict as much as possible. Um, and it mentions here people at bars picking fights. So um, I haven't been to a bar recently, so but I don't think hopefully the monks aren't either. So hopefully we should just avoid the bar and avoid the fights in the bar too. So but I think you could do so. You could do self-defense if you need to, but there also might be a witness value where you don't defend yourself and allow yourself to be harmed as a witness to the gospel and imitation of Christ. So that might be the calling that God asks of us in that situation, even if strictly speaking, a monk could defend himself in that situation. But in general, you want to avoid physical conflicts in general. So I hope that helps. Thanks for the questions, and I wish you the best as you wrap up your class for the summer. I take it this is a summer class. So God bless you. Please pray for us here at the monastery, and I'll keep you in my prayers.